Welcome to Lesson 6, Early Reading Instruction and Response to Intervention, RTI. This is a slide on maximizing your learning for this series of slides on early reading instruction and response to intervention. I urge you to read it and follow it as you proceed through this lesson. The following are lesson objectives and the naming of two educational experts on early reading instruction and response to intervention. First objective is you will be able to explain what the importance of alphabet learning is to reading and how to teach it. 2. Make sense of the research underlying the teaching of phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, and decoding. 3. Know the purpose and stages of response to intervention, RTI. And 4. Know the role of assessment in RTI. The two experts that you will hear from are David Pearson and Sharon Piesta. The following are points to ponder before you delve into the rest of the slides. As you study early literacy reading methods, response to interventions that are contained in the following slides, think about the research and suggested principles that you've already learned about teaching phonological awareness and the alphabet, and their importance for eventual reading success. Discuss these principles and relate the research you have read. Discuss these principles and relate to the practice that you have seen in the schools. The next two slides deal with alphabet learning and early literacy, and you will be hearing from Sharon Piesta in a 13-minute podcast. Some of the high points from the podcast are that she discusses research on the importance of alphabet learning as an early literacy skill. And she has cited some of the most current research on the fact that you should combine letter naming and letter forms with the sounds that the letters represent. This is something that is a little bit newer in the research. I can remember research that occurred back in the 60s where they said it was just the opposite, that you should not teach letter names because those confuse the children. Well, now with better improved research methods, with more research under our belts, we now know that we do need to teach the letter names. Children should be able to name them rapidly and automatically in order to use those as part of decoding. So it is best to combine letter naming and their forms, what they look like, with the sounds that the letters represent. She also suggests that teachers teach alphabet learning in the context of reading to children, not in isolation. All right, this is the second slide based on the podcast by Sharon Piesta. And I just want to let you know that the research that I have read and the research that I have done differs from what she is suggesting. So this should put you in a state where you would want to find out on your own through more reading and perhaps working with children. But I have found that teachers should teach the letters in the alphabet in context and in isolation through rote drill. And I believe I mentioned in a preceding lesson how I used to, for my first grade students, put letters of the alphabet on the floor, play marching music, and they marched around on them and said the name of the letter and the sound that it represented as they marched on the letters. They loved this. Rote drill does not necessarily mean drill and kill, as some would have you believe. Other ways to do it are to write letters on the whiteboard or post them someplace and let students throw a ball at them or swat them with a fly swatter and say their names, or also names and sounds. And so in a case like this where the research is differing, the primary thing that you should get from it is that students need to learn the names of their letters and be able to recognize them in print. That's a given, and there's no differing research on that. When you think about how to teach it, try it in context. If it works and the children are learning and enjoying it, then go for it. But if you have some students who need to see it presented in a different way, then you may have to take those letters out and show them to them in isolation, and do it in a developmentally appropriate way where the children regard it as a game. You have a serious purpose. They think they're playing. All right, next one. Teachers must have a system for teaching. And that is called systematic instruction, and that goes along with direct instruction. And they must have a system for teaching to ensure that all letters and their sounds are encountered or learned by the children. You want to ensure that children have multiple encounters with letters, and you want to mix them up. You don't always want to have them do it in the ABC order, because then they will rotely learn that, and it will be letter calling without really knowing them. And when they see them in different configurations in text and in different orders, they are likely to not be able to remember those letters unless they have learned them mixed up and in text in different ways. You need to provide ways to differentiate instruction, such as in isolation, in context, different ways to drill them, to teach them, to expose them to these letters. To reinforce my point that you are going to be teaching letters in isolation as well as in context, I want you to see that drill does not have to be boring. You can have your students sing songs that emphasize one sound, such as baba 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 Batman. I've already talked about this one, laying letter tiles or write letters on the floor. You can use finger paint. You can use finger paints, colored glue sticks, sand, and have children draw individual letters as you say them. And of course, you want them to repeat them as well. There is an IES practice guide assisting students struggling with reading responses to interventions that go with this series of slides for this lesson. Instead of a textbook, you are required to read these practice guides plus the other materials to get a very well-rounded view as to what the research is telling you to do in your classrooms. These practice guides, as I've mentioned before, and hopefully you've already noticed, are very teacher-friendly, very interesting, and they do a good job of showing you how to implement some of their ideas and strategies rather than just telling you what to do. The website for accessing the guides are at the top of your slides. Now on page 4, response for intervention, I took out some of the key points. 1, it is for early detection and prevention. If you can prevent problems from happening, you are way ahead of the game, and you will save your students a lot of wasted instructional time, a lot of frustration, and as I believe it was Tim Shanahan said, a lot of shame when they find that they're not keeping up with others. And so you really do want to detect problems early so that you can get in there, provide an intervention, and prevent them from having more serious problems. Response to intervention is for struggling readers, and again, it assists students before they fall behind. It's a nice combination, a strong combination of assessment and high-quality interventions, where you measure students' responses to the interventions, and then you make one of 3 determinations. 1, they no longer need an intervention. You found the problem, you fixed the problem, and now they are proceeding just fine. 2, they continue to need an intervention. Or 3, let me back up to 2 for a minute. They continue to need an intervention, perhaps just for a longer period of time, perhaps taught a slightly different way, but they just need a little more time in order to remediate some of the knowledge that they're lacking. But if that extra time doesn't work, then you're going to need to look to more intensive interventions and work with them for longer periods of time and in different ways. There are 3 levels of interventions. Tier 1 is the reading instruction that you provide to all students. Tier 2 are the interventions that you provide to students who have demonstrated problems that is based on assessment of those students. And Tier 3 are interventions provided to students who have not progressed in a reasonable time. As you know from the preceding guides, IES is based on research, and they have categorized this research according to its strength, from strong, moderate to low. Even the research in here that has been categorized as low has been shown to work. It's just that there are not enough studies to make it such a surefire way of teaching, that there's more research that needs to be done, but the initial results are promising. And you can read again for yourselves. We've gone over this in other lessons, what it means to have strong, moderate, and low levels of evidence. Recommendation 1, screen all students for potential reading problems. So even those that don't exhibit potential reading problems, you want to make sure that you're not missing anything. And this has moderate evidence. So there is causal evidence that this will help all students. Universal screening is a critical first step that begins in the kindergarten through 2 grades. Use efficient, valid, and reliable measures. And the IES guide describes these in more detail. I'm just giving you the high points here. Monitor progress on a monthly or weekly basis. Conduct a second screening mid-year. And it's best for assessments, the ones that you're going to use, to be selected by the school rather than left to individual teachers. And one point to ponder might be why. It's the teachers who know the students. Shouldn't they be the ones to select the assessments? Or why would it be better to have it more standardized when it is selected by the school and used by all teachers? Recommendation 2, provide differentiated reading instruction for all students based on assessments of students' current reading levels. Teachers should differentiate reading instruction in Tier 1. That's to all of their students. This can be done through small groups with partners or individual direct instruction. The more teachers used assessment information, the greater their students' learned reading skills. That's a very powerful one. Gather assessment, evaluate what's going on with your students, and then use that to inform your instruction. And the research has shown that teachers who do this have much stronger performance from their students than teachers who do not. In order to use assessment effectively, in order to choose the right assessment, if it is left up to the teachers, they must be trained to assess and evaluate the results. The training could come from a senior teacher, a lead teacher. It could come from one of the professionals in your schools. They may invite people to come and help the teachers, but seek help when you're evaluating your results so that you know that you're interpreting them correctly. Increase the level of difficulty as students improve their learning of specific reading skills. We don't want to keep them stuck at the same level. If they're moving on, you need to assess that, determine that, and move your curriculum so that they are progressing and being challenged. First grade teachers should focus more on explicit, meaning direct instruction, focused instruction, and less on independent silent reading. Why do you think this would be? Recommendation 3. Provide intensive, systematic instruction on up to 3 foundational reading skills in small groups of students who score below the benchmark on universal screening. This is Tier 2 and it has strong evidence. Interventional programs are called standard protocols. So as you're reading through your IES guides and other articles and information about reading response to intervention, this will help you with your comprehension if you weren't sure about what standard protocols mean. Simply intervention curriculum. Tutoring programs are to be taught to all students scoring below benchmark, scoring below grade level. Recommended that schools use programs for Tier 2 instruction for at least 5 weeks. And then in italics, I'm asking you, then what should the teacher do? And your answer should be assess the student and evaluate the data that you get. Intervention curriculum must address fundamental reading skills systematically, not in a hodgepodge way where you might forget one, not in a way where you might be jumping ahead to one that's more complex and more difficult than another, but in a systematic way where the skills build on themselves. We are continuing discussing about providing systematic instruction on up to 3 foundational reading skills to students. Kindergarten is a critical year, and the students in kindergarten must be able to segment phonemes. It's a key indicator of later reading success. By segmenting phonemes, I mean they take a word such as cat and they're able to say each of the 3 phonemes. K, a, t. They must also be able to match letters to speech sounds. They must be able to demonstrate beginning decoding skills, blending written letters into words. When they see the letter C, the letter A, the letter T written out, they should be able to blend those 3 sounds, first slowly and hesitantly perhaps, but then with practice faster and faster to where it becomes a real word. The above elements that we just mentioned, or I just mentioned, lead to reading fluency and comprehension, which is reading. On page 21, table 4, there is a progression of necessary reading skills, and those are something that you should look at very carefully because that will help you decide which skills you want to tackle first with your students, which ones you think they should know, and which ones that you're going to lead them toward as you continue your planning and your teaching. A question for you is, what is the difference between reading skills and reading? Some people confuse those. We're still discussing recommendation 3, where teachers are to provide intensive systematic instruction on up to 3 foundational reading skills. The recommendations in the IES practice guide is that instruction should take place with 3 to 4 students grouped homogeneously. Teachers should address the major components of reading instruction based on the individual student's scores, and that would relate to comprehension, fluency, phonemic awareness, phonics, and vocabulary. And there is a list that's continued on the next slide. Instruction must be systematic and explicit. By now you should know what that means. Ask yourself. If you don't, go back and look at Rosenshine's article from Lesson 2. All right, we're still talking about recommendation 3, and this relates to Tier 2 instruction. You're going to provide opportunities for guided student practice with frequent teacher feedback. Guided student practice is a direct instruction method. It's where the students are working, but with your support. You want to make sure that you are assessing the students as they work so they're not practicing mistakes. Positive outcomes have been shown when intensive instruction at the Tier 2 level is given 3 to 5 times per week. In kindergarten, the length of the lessons would be 20 to 30 minutes, and in grades 1 and 2, the lengths of the lessons would be 40 to 50 minutes. Because the lengths of the lessons for very young children are long, you're going to need to plan a lot of active yet focused activities on the skills that you are teaching your students. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do this for teaching those foundational reading skills. We've covered some of them, such as games, such as marching, such as swatting letters, and there are books and there is information on the internet. All you have to do is seek it out so that you can vary your instruction and make it developmentally appropriate and lively for your students. Now, an interesting fact is that evidence suggests that the time spent on each area of instruction might be more important than the total instructional time, meaning if you have it focused on areas of instruction, that's more important than total instructional time, where some of that time might be spent on less important skills, less important talk. And so you want to make sure that when you have these children and you're working with them, this is serious business. You want them to be engaged in focused instruction. How your time is spent is critical. All right, recommendation 4, monitor the progress of Tier 2 students at least once a month. Use these data to determine whether students still require intervention. For those students still making insufficient progress, school-wide teacher should design a Tier 3 intervention plan. Well, that's kind of crappy. Recommendation 5. Provide intensive instruction on a daily basis that promotes the development of the various components of reading proficiency to students who show minimal progress after reasonable time in Tier 2 small group instruction. In other words, this is talking about Tier 3 interventions, those who did not respond well to Tier 2 interventions and what you can do about it. There is low evidence. Most of the information here is based on theorists' opinion and some studies, but it still is considered to be research-based and is worth using. Major gaps persist in knowledge of how to teach reading to those 3 to 5% of students with severe reading difficulties. There is little research on students with low intervention responses. Therefore, the recommendations are based on the opinions of the panel due to minimal research that could ground instruction. Continuing with recommendation 5, intensive interventions for students who did not respond to Tier 2 interventions. In Tier 3, you will focus on a small set of reading-related skills to avoid overwhelming the student. Use a systematic plan to avoid scattering the instruction across different aspects of reading. And use diagnostic assessments to pinpoint areas of difficulty and one-on-one instruction. Furthermore, when you are providing intensive interventions to students in Tier 3, move beyond decoding to comprehension and vocabulary, especially with older children. Use a slow, deliberate lesson pace until the student demonstrates mastery. Provide multiple opportunities for guided, supported practice. The goal is to withdraw supports as the students learn. But you don't want to withdraw it too quickly until you know that they have a good grasp of the material. Use graphic organizers, color-coded materials, and manipulatives to support your instruction. Combine skills such as spelling aids, decoding, and reading. Increase instructional time 45 to 120 additional minutes. There is no research guidance on this, but certainly you would want to break up those longer periods of time and not keep a child sitting for 120 straight minutes. But throughout the day, you should give intensive intervention instruction to students to the point where it totals between 45 minutes and 120 additional minutes. Here are some points to ponder. Each recommendation in the practice guide is accompanied by a section entitled Roadblocks and Suggested Approaches. Discuss the roadblocks and the approaches that they lay out for you, and then relate these to your own experiences and see whether you have used different approaches and whether you have experienced some of the same roadblocks and different roadblocks. This slide refers to a video on connecting skills to text. It's a 25-minute, 37-second video that would be very informative to you as far as ways that different teachers connect skills to text. Some of the recommendations from the video is to provide explicit phonics instruction for young children, provide explicit phonics instruction integrated with good children's literature. And last, it's very important to engage in systematic planning of your curriculum so that the children master the benchmarks or framework competencies in an organized, systematic way. Continuing with the videos, these are some of the other things that you will see. Elements of a comprehensive reading program where explicit systematic skills and word instruction is described. You will also see how contextual instruction that contains the skills and words from the explicit instruction is important to your teaching. You'll see conversations, how conversations and read-alouds aid comprehension and reading skills learning. Most rich vocabulary is learned from children's books, not conversations with adults. Therefore, it is extremely important to have a lot of read-alouds, and when you do have conversations, keep those focused and minimal compared to the words that you are going to be exposing your students to through reading aloud to them. The reason for this, if you look at the children's books and number of rare words per thousand, in children's books, even children's picture books, the number of rare words per 1,000 is 30.9. Conversations, even with college-educated adults, the number of rare words is 17.3. So, if your intention is to provide the students with rich vocabulary, spend more time with books, reading books to them, rather than talking with them. More information about what you will be seeing in the video. There is a video on kindergarten classroom practice that shows you how to set up a library center with poems on charts, a word wall, and pocket chart. There's a tub center that contains materials for students to review. There's a writing center with a word bank poster, phonemic awareness with a large mouth puppet, and a review of the 100 most frequently used words. Now that you have seen the video on connecting skills to text, consider these points. Consider the skills that children use during writing. And what is the relationship between reading skills and writing? And how can you combine children's literature and basic reading skills in your teaching? This is a question that might aid you as you are working on your integrated thematic unit for this class. Now there's a podcast that you should listen to by Dr. David Pearson. Dr. Pearson is a very noted researcher in reading comprehension and vocabulary development, as well as foundational reading skills. The podcast is 19 minutes and 1 second. And here are some high points that you'll be hearing from this. When I provide these high points for you, or these notes for you based on the podcasts or the videos, it would be good to copy them down or print them off from the slides and follow along as you are either watching the video or, in this case, listening to the podcast. David Pearson says that the results are mixed for reading first as far as the effectiveness on closing the reading gap. Reading First, of course, is a program for children in the early grades. He said that the focus on phonological awareness and decoding is best for grades pre-K through 1 or the first part of grade 2. And then a couple of the next points are rather shocking in a way. He says there is no research to show that phonological awareness and decoding helps older readers. What he means by this is that if older readers have progressed, have gone on to say 3rd, 4th, 5th grades and above, and they do not have good phonological awareness and decoding skills, it is going to be very difficult at that point to teach it to them, and your time is most likely better spent teaching them how to recognize sight words, get meaning for words through context, and have them engage in comprehension strategies, because it's very difficult to teach phonological awareness and decoding to older students. My own opinion is that's true, but I would start by assessing older students who are struggling to find out what to find out what skills they're lacking, and if they're lacking phonological awareness and decoding, I would try to remediate that. But if it's like hitting a brick wall, they are just not getting it, keep in mind that Dr. Pearson said that there is no research that shows that phonological awareness and decoding interventions help older readers. And if I gave it a good try, not lengthy, but a good try, and found that he was right, then I would move into other aspects of reading. He also suggests less focus on vocabulary development and comprehension. And of course, again, this is for pre-K and 1 or first part of grade 2. And at those levels, because the phonological awareness and phonics is so important, he thinks that teachers should spend more time on those foundational skills and work on explicitly teaching vocabulary development and comprehension for students who are in the 2nd grade and above. Common Core standards include the elements of a comprehensive reading program, and it would be very interesting for you to track the types of skills that they show that you should emphasize, because they have these laid out on a rather neat grid where you can see at what stage you should really emphasize certain foundational reading skills. The following points to ponder are based on the podcast by Dr. David Pearson. I hope that his podcast gave you some food for thought as far as reading skills that are effective with students and the different ages where they are effective, and make you think about that. Especially, I think his comment about the teaching of vocabulary and comprehension and where their role would fit into the curriculum. Anyway, points to ponder based on the podcasts are: why are the foundational skills of phonological awareness and phonemic awareness less important to teach after grade 2? Another one would be to compare the Common Core standards with your state frameworks. When are reading skills introduced, and how do they, both Common Core and state frameworks, compare with Dr. Pearson's recommendations?